Welcome, 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 everybody. We got the full crew with us today. This is Open Conversations with International Coaches for November 9th. Wow, 2023. I'm going to sound like one of those newscasters at the first of the month saying, can you believe it's November
It's
already?
November.
Can you believe we're a third of the way through November already? Um,
Mm.
and today's topic is perspective. As we were discussing, Shelley-Ann and I, just before we got started, there's a lot of perspectives to talk about on when we get on the topic of perspective. Um, it's a broad topic. Many of our topics seem to be quite broad, even when they focus on one thing. But I think perspective is is an area that we really should look into deeply. There are some things. So before we get into that topic, let's go around the shoe and introduce ourselves. Go ahead, Gerald. You can start today.
Hi everyone, my name is Gerald Alexander and I'm from Scotland and I'm an image consultant. Basically, that would be how do you describe the reflection you see in the mirror? Now, I guess that would have a lot to do with today's subject. It all depends on your perspective, so. Uh, and it's all about like self-identity, how we talk to ourselves, where we're going, giving ourselves a sense of direction. What do we want, and how do we see ourselves? All about empowering and having that self belief to live the life that we desire, that we dream of.
Awesome. Yeah. Shelley Ann?
Hi, I am I'm Shelley-Ann Edwards Barron, a gratitude guide and habit coach from Trinidad and Tobago. I help people identify and establish keystone habits that lead them to successfully achieving their goals, and all starting with that keystone habit of gratitude. I work with professionals who feel they're not making any progress, even though they're totally exhausted from working all the time and they work really hard, but they just can't seem to, get it together or remain consistent to complete their goals. So I show them how to say it right by making language and self talk empowering, how to say it loud by making gratitude tangible and active, and how to say it always by establishing that daily habit of intentional gratitude. So this gratitude strategy gives them a foundation to build other habits on that bring them the freedom and joy that they're looking for. So if you're feeling frustrated and stuck and like you've tried everything but nothing seems to work, check out my channel, Getting It Done with Gratitude, for weekly discussions on how to use gratitude to help you become consistent. And reach out to me on LinkedIn, Facebook, so I can help you sort through the noise and get back on track to where you really want to be.
That's awesome. Gratitude is so important when we feel it, when we really feel it
Yeah,
and,
you do
and
have
express it.
to feel
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's awesome. Cass?
Hi, I'm Cass J. Henry from Ontario, Canada. As a holistic life mentor, I'm interested in the bigger picture of what makes you you, the mind, the body, the spirit. I work with clients when they're feeling stuck. They're looking to overcome self doubt, manifest their dreams. I'm here to give a different perspective. I work with my clients both in person and virtually. And if this sounds like something you're interested in, you can find me on catastrophe.com, where you'll see that I also do other related services like Reiki, crystal healing, oracle cards, etc.
Excellent. And I guess I'll jump in for the final spot. My name is Stephen B. Henry. My friends call me Steve, and you can too. I'm a multi niched creative, a digital content creator, an online presence consultant, a business success guide, and a personal development mentor. I work with those wanting to start or expand an online business, helping them get unstuck, that word again, in their business and their personal lives and move forward, excuse me, on their journey of success. I'm a Canadian expat currently living in the US. You can find me at stephenbhenry.com. And with that, we'll jump into the topic today, perspective. And really, there's so many ways we could pick up on this. So somebody jump in. What have you got to share?
I can
Perspective
jump
and
in quick.
perspectives. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say I can jump in quickly with a little bit of like definition for people. We're talking about not necessarily the artistic perspective of a vanishing point, but we're talking about your perspective, the way you see something. So if you think that that toys are corrupt and that they ruin children's minds, and from your perspective, something like a toy shop would be an evil place, right? So if you see one thing, you're going to connect it with the other. Perspective, I was going to say it has a Latin root, so look through or perceive, and it's all about what you're looking at.
Yeah, how you see things is how I would interpret it, and your point of view, both
Yeah.
physically and emotionally or mentally. Um, what's the tale about
The elephant, right?
the
The
three blind men
elephant.
and the elephant? Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
one says that an elephant is like a big snake because he happens to feel the trunk. Another said, no, an elephant is like a brick wall, and that's because he felt the side of the elephant. And then the third one says, no, an elephant is like a rope because he held onto his tail. And it's your perspective. Even in this case, being blind and feeling rather than seeing, and I've certainly had experience with that over the years. And it is very, very impressive how blind people see things, what their perspective is, and we can learn a lot from that about our own perspective. It kind of pulls us up short sometimes.
Yeah, that story reminds me of the idea, well, it actually brought home for me, I think, which is the point of the story, about individual perspectives being useful but not 100% accurate. And so that we all do need to try to understand other perspectives to get a broader view of things. And for me, coming from the Caribbean, and on the map, when you have the whole map, world map pulled out, you need a magnifying glass to find where Trinidad and Tobago is, right? So one of the things that really fascinates me about perspective is how different things are around the world, and the way things are viewed from, based on the cultural influences and all these other things. And for me, it was quite a daunting prospect getting online and interacting with people from different cultures, different countries, different walks of life. And so perspective, I did it because I wanted that international perspective, which is why I love this conversation. Um, but it's not a simple thing, just to say, hey, I'm going to try other perspectives and think in other perspectives. It really does take some doing.
We are certainly guided, whether we like it or not, by our existing perspective, and that is a factor of what we've learned over the years, what we've experienced over the years, what we've chosen over the years. So many different areas that affect our perspective. Interesting, you used the map as an example because I grew up in Canada in Canadian schools, and we always, when I all through elementary school, we had maps in the classroom. And they were actually provided for the education system by uh, uh, candy bar companies. Later on, in their wisdom, politicians felt that that was no longer a good idea because it was causing children to see pictures of candy bars, and therefore they would be more likely to eat the candy bars. And so they passed regulation, at least in Ontario, that you could not have advertising on maps or other presentations in the classroom, which meant that the school board now had to pay for the maps instead of, O. Henry chocolate bars paying for the map, which, took that much more money out of the budget for other things. And it was probably a very short-sighted perspective, that made things weird. But what it led to, or what it is over that time, the candy bars, I don't think I ever bought. I don't think I ever sat in classrooms salivating over, a crispy crunch and then running down to the store afterwards to buy one. I probably ran down to the store afterwards to buy one, but not because they were on the map. Well, at least I don't think so. But the maps that we had there of the world, a big map of the world, and then a big map of Canada and the U.S., and maybe in some grades a big map of just Canada, with a little bit of the U.S. at the bottom to be able to fit it all in. But they were all on Mercator projections, which made me grow up thinking that Greenland was a huge, big piece of land, which of course it isn't. And it shocks people when they actually look at a globe for the first time and see how small Greenland is and how small the northern islands of Canada are. And so perspective, the way you perceive things, can be presented to you in different ways so that you learn things that are not necessarily true. And so the Mercator perspective is just a way of drawing land so that it fits on a rectangular sheet of paper, drawing the map, without having cut out pieces that have nothing in them. So, if you take a globe and slice it into wedges and open it out, there's all of these V-shaped empty spaces that the Mercator projection fills in. And I think it's a good example of how perspective can be skewed. People around us, the people that we interact with, can skew our perspective. And clients working with a coach often have a perspective that is different than the perspective of the coach. And it may not be a true perspective. The coach may not have a true perspective, and they may clash with each other as they sort out the commonality within their perspectives, and and come either just factually or actually work at it openly to find common ground in perspective so that they can work together. And the problem is, we've gone through a whole political era in the U.S. here, where one of the big terms is alternate facts. The news people were interviewing the spokesman for the president, the White House, and she was saying things that were simply not true, but it was their talking points. And I really think there ought to be a law passed that at least government officials have to tell the truth, but probably politicians too, although that would never happen. But they wouldn't get in if they told the truth. But but she was saying a lot of things, and the reporter kind of stood up to her and pressed back and said, but those aren't true. They're not facts. And the White House spokesman coined the phrase at that point, well, yes, but they're alternate facts. And that's become a bit of a joke for those who understand, and a watchword for those who don't, that we're living in a time of alternate facts. And with perspective, you often do have alternate facts. That's the unfortunate thing about perspective. It's the way we perceive it, which may not be a factual way. That doesn't make it wrong. It just means Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to interrupt to say. Not that it's right or wrong
Yeah.
or any less valid, because that's your perspective. And when you're working with someone as a coach or a client, or you're interacting with anybody else, understanding that their perspective is valid for them, and therefore a valid consideration in whatever communication you're having, doesn't mean that you have to agree and say that they're right, or disagree and say that they're wrong. The fact is, it will influence what they are doing. And once you are interacting with them, it's going to influence your interaction with them and the situation. So it's a valid point of consideration.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think something that really needs to be linked to perspective, especially when you're working with other people, is critical thinking. Just the idea that like you have to analyze what's going on, and you have to
Yeah.
see if you're coming to a common ground or not. And I think gratitude comes in here too again, where you know you're taking the time to think about what the other person is seeing, think about what the how the other person might view what's going on, and being grateful for the ability to have those two perspectives, the walking in somebody else's shoes kind of idea.
And it's also even understanding your own, because sometimes we take it for granted that we understand our own perspective when we don't, especially if we have never taken the time to understand or determine where the perspective came from, what created it. If we don't know that, we don't know if this is the perspective we want to keep, or if we want to modify it based on new information.
You're talking about introspection now, right?
Introspection, even with the gratitude, because as Stephen said, perspective is about the angle at which we view something. And sometimes in that coach client relationship, our perspectives are different and they could be skewed as a result of what people call limiting beliefs, and the whole gamut of childhood experiences and all those things. And if we don't sit and think, I always start with gratitude in the sense that, okay, I'm grateful for this opportunity. And then when I start looking at all the things that I can be grateful for, it can change my thinking in terms of, if without that I'm seeing all the negativity, but then the gratitude helps me see what exists that is positive. And so I'm able to think more critically about the situation. So that's the perspective that I was seeking it from.
Yeah, that's great critical thinking, both of you. It's there. Gerald, you've been looking at this conversation from your perspective, and I know I saw you writing down some notes, so you must be, you know,
Uh,
got something to
um,
share.
Another great wordcast, by the way. I mean, I'm just wondering where this one's leading us. And I mean, because it just seems to be getting further and further away as we're trying to pinpoint it. I mean, like as you said, Steve, like a point of view. And then what dramatically changes that is like the way you see something. And it depends on what you're talking about, Shelley Ann. It depends what culture that point of view was created from. And then are you still in that culture, or are you taking that point of view into your own culture? And then how politics was brought into that as well. Isn't that why politicians never answer yes or no? Because they can't please everybody. So no matter what they say, it's not going to please everybody, and they're trying to just, under present themselves as if they understand everyone's perspective, although it's all different. So, yeah, it's um, how we see things. And then, Cash, you brought the word in there, perceive. I think it was at that point I realized how big a word this is again, because, like the perceive is a combination, like the kaleidoscope, what we're seeing through our eyes, through our beliefs, through our values, through our culture, all them are coming towards how we perceive it from our perspective as an individual. So, great word.
It's hard
Yeah,
to
it's like,
discuss
go ahead, Steve.
perspective without the word perspective. It's
Yeah.
one
We'll
of
have to
those.
think of like point of view, the way we see things, different.
I, I was going to
One
say
of
it's
the,
about the different lenses that we wear,
Yeah.
right? The
yeah.
idea that we have, for me, like I have the lens of a mother, and I have the lens of a Canadian, and I have the lens of a person living with physical disabilities. And so when I look at things, I see them differently than people who don't. Disability is a great one for an example. A silly little thing. I'm a fat person who also has disability, and when I go into a space that's like a waiting room, for example, and they have chairs, and my doctor's office has many different types of chairs. They're very, very inclusive in that way, and there are chairs for people who need to sit higher. There are chairs for people who need to sit lower. There are chairs with arms. There are chairs without arms, and there are wider chairs, and there's many to choose from. So that's a wonderful place. But when I went to a different waiting room that wasn't at my doctor's office, there was one chair that was wide enough for me. And a petite woman was sitting in that chair with her purse beside her on it. And I didn't have the nerve in that moment to say, excuse me, that's the only chair I can fit in. Could you move? And so I came home and I typed up this angry thing on my social media. And I said, oh, this person was so rude today. And a couple people in my friends list said, well, Cass, until I read this type up that you've done on your social media, it never even occurred to me that those chairs were for people other than me and my purse. It never, I've seen people with their children sitting with them and their child in the chair. And I've never ever thought that anybody else might need these chairs. So thank you for sharing your perspective, because it's different than mine, and I'd never seen it through those eyes.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think, we get stuck in a negative. Oh, I don't like the word negative. We get stuck in an unhelpful emotion or mood or point of view because we haven't considered the other person's point of view might be different from ours. So those different lenses that we view the world through is something that I think we often need to consider.
And just recognizing that not everyone is wearing the same lens. And
Right.
not only is it okay, it's inevitable. And that's actually a good thing, because if we all saw everything the same way, then where would the growth and the exploration and the wonder of life really come from?
Yeah, and Gerald often uses the reference of a kaleidoscope, and I had one when I was a kid, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. I could look at it, look through it, um, I don't know, not maybe not hours at a time, but certainly tens of minutes at a time, just fascinated by the patterns. And I really think that applies here, as Gerald referenced it a few minutes ago, um, that we don't necessarily have one lens that we see things through. We have, as Cass itemized, we have many lenses, and they split the light. They split what we're aware of, our perception, in different ways, each, so that we do end up with this kaleidoscope of, situations, emotions, attitudes, gratitude being one of them, those kinds of things. And sometimes we have to rein in our own lenses. We have to make sure that we, sometimes we put our glasses on, and sometimes we take them off, and sometimes we put them in our pocket. And that's just a metaphor for it, but it's true that as we understand perspectives in general, let alone our own perspectives, but perspectives in general, we recognize that our perspectives may be different than your perspectives, and we start kind of, the dance of bringing these all together so that we can look at them and choose them and work with them and so on. We'll find ones that work better for us, and if we're honest and open, then we may find, I may find that your perspective on something is intriguing to me and a new way of looking that I hadn't thought of. And if I'm just open enough to share it, it might change my perspective, and vice versa. And I see examples of that all the time in our conversations here. For those of you watching these conversations, you may have noticed that as we talk and share ideas, there's often a brightening of a face. There's often a raising of an eyebrow. There's often, an aha moment, a nodding, and so on, as we recognize something that's a person is saying. Sometimes they're saying what we've already believed, but sometimes they're saying something new to our experience, and we're embracing it and taking it in. We're modifying our perspective, and that's the power of a group of people. And wow, for you guys that are out there listening, you don't just have to listen to me or Gerald or Cass or Shelly Ann. You get all of us. that's an awesome perspective, because you don't have to agree with all of us or any of us, and you can have your own perspective. But you have to. Cass always admonishes me about affirmatives, but you could choose to open up your own perspective to allow that of somebody else to come in and see if it doesn't make a positive effect for you. If it doesn't, set it aside, try something else. But taking different perspectives on things definitely gives you more opportunity and more exposure, sometimes more risk. But
I
again,
think always more risk.
yeah, I think that's part of what, Shelley Ann, you referred to I forget the exact words you used, but the life experience and the wonder and the learning and the what we gain and the excitement we have, that comes with risk, and
Yeah.
it's worth the risk. It's worth it to be a little bit vulnerable. Cass, your example of what you posted on social media was being a little bit vulnerable. You you overcame the fear of the vulnerability through your anger, but which you normally don't like to do. But you you did that, got through the vulnerability, and shared something that was kind of eating you up a bit. And by sharing it, you got it out of yourself. You got to look at it. You've got a different perspective at what you had experienced. Now you're having a perspective at what you shared about it. Might not have been all of it. And you got feedback, which was kind of surprising feedback from where you were positioning yourself. So, the power of having a perspective and then sharing a perspective. That's maybe a topic we need to discuss sometime in the future,
Yeah.
is the
And
word sharing.
I'm thinking of experimentation as
Mm,
well as
yeah.
another one, because with that risk taking and so on, and this is one of the things that working with a coach can really support you with, taking small steps with experimentation within a safe space that you can explore ideas and therefore be able to see different perspectives. Because one of the things that I learned I was doing a habit coaching course. I did my exam, results are Sunday, fingers, toes, everything crossed, prayers, please. Um, but one of the things that really came out to me through that course was this concept of running experiments and helping clients to understand that experimentation mindset is what they called it. Because sometimes we don't know what is going to work immediately, because perspectives are different, people are different, and what worked with one client may not work with another one, and what worked for me might not work for you. So I can share what worked for me. And if we don't have any other suggestions, we can try that. But recognize that it may not work for you. But if we have that experimentation mindset, then we can look at it and step back and see, okay, what part of it worked, what didn't work, what did it teach us, so that we can, regroup, reframe, and try again. But if we go into it with this idea that, okay, I'm coming to this coach, and this coach is going to guide me into doing things that work immediately, then we're going to have a really challenging time in moving forward.
Mhm. Um, while Steve was talking, you got me thinking about the idea that um, how you look at something in life. We all have different perspectives, but ultimately you have to zoom out to see more. And that's where the other people fit in, because you can't necessarily, when you zoom out, or when you conceptually want to zoom out, you can't necessarily fill in those blanks because you don't see it from that perspective. So you need other people to help fill in those blanks on the map. And Shelly-Ann, you got me thinking about exposure therapy, right? The idea that, like, when you're trying things, you can try them slowly, in
Yeah.
a gradual way to get to what you're hoping for. But every step is an experimentation along the way.
Yeah.
Does this
Yeah.
work? Is this going to help? Do I need more? And then for Gerald, one of my favorite quotes, Arthur Schopenhauer is one of the people I love to quote, and he says, "Every person takes the limits of their own field of vision for the limits of the world."
Mm.
Right? We don't zoom out. We see what we see, and that's all there is. But
Yeah.
there's so much more.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much more within our field of vision that we don't see. And,
Yeah.
and that's let alone what is outside of our field of vision. It's just, it's sad to me sometimes when I meet people who don't see. Gerald has used the example in the past of somebody sitting on the curb, their butt down on the curb, their feet in the gutter, their knees up, and resting their face down on their hands on their knees, not seeing what's going on around them, and not even able to get up and move because they're so depressed and so caught in their little space. And that's a tremendous analogy for all of us in our own spaces. If we take, I'm not sitting on a curb, I'm aggressive, I'm active, I do. But if we take whatever we are and then visualize that as being that person sitting on the curb, kind of wrapped up, and say, all right, now what else would we do beyond where we are with all this stuff that we have? What's beyond that? And, it opens the door to things that we haven't thought of because we're too busy focused on our own little world. And no matter what you're doing, your world is small compared to what is available.
Yeah.
That's why a
Well,
good
that last
coach is
Dreaming
question
and
is,
goal
necessary.
setting. Oh,
yeah. Yeah. This one is an exciting one. We all want to jump in. Go ahead, guys.
Oh, I was just gonna say, dreaming big and goal setting outside the goalposts, and what can you do versus what do you
Yeah.
want to do versus what's possible.
Yeah. And so to add to that, it's those two questions are so powerful. When Steve, when you were speaking, you mentioned what else? And there's another one, what if? Those two questions, what else and what is? What if? What else is out there? What if I can access it? What if I do this? What if I do that? And that really keeps the newness of a situation present, as opposed to getting fixed, and what we kind of tend to call the fixed mindset, where this is the way it is, this is what I'm accustomed to, this is what I'm going to work with, without really exploring what comes beyond those boundaries.
What
Have the
if
blinders
and
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
what if and what else are two powerful phrases.
Yeah.
I kind of distill them both down. I've been very very fortunate over my life to have some awesome mentors and coaches, and one of the things that I learned is a simple word that kind of embodies those in my way of thinking, because I've often in my life said, well, what else, and what if? What if I could do this? And what else is available to me to do if I can't? If I can't do this, what else can I do? And I've kind of distilled that down to the one word: next. So many people get caught up when things don't work, and I do myself. I mean, we're all four of us are human, and we suffer the frailties of people. And so, folks, if you're watching us, don't think that we've got all the answers and we're the best, and we're the only ones you should listen to. That's not the case at all. But all of us are people who are committed to giving back for what we've got over the years, and helping other people. And we are here, we're available, and we're approachable. But I learned that when things don't go right, you're talking to a person, you're prospecting, you're prospecting a client, a potential client, and maybe they've contacted you, or you've seen them and seen a need, and you reach out to them, and nothing happens. They're not interested. They don't believe in this kind of stuff. It's just so much woo-woo stuff. Even though it's grounded in fact and reality, because it's mind things, they can't visualize it. We talked about visualization before, and they turn you down. And a lot of people get so depressed at that, and so withdrawn internally. Just next. It's like a barber. That example was shown to me when he's finished with the haircut in a barber shop, and he takes off the bib, and he shakes it, and the person gets up and reaches into their wallet and pays them and walks out the door. What does the barber say? Next. He doesn't worry about that person. They'll come back if they liked his work, and when hair grows, they need to have it trimmed again. That's fine. He's not going to spend a lot of time worrying. And if a person comes into the barber shop and looks around and says, "Oh, I don't like the look of this place," and walks out, what does the barber say? "Oh my goodness, I don't know what's going to happen. My business is going to fail." Nope. Barber says, "Next." And somehow they seem to be pretty busy. So, barbers, the OBGYNs, and funeral directors.
That's a good example, Steve, like how you're always saying, turn your stepping stones, turn the obstacles, stumbling blocks into stepping stones. Whereas, and then when you're viewing too far into the future, which involves the word worry and stress, whereas one step at a time, isn't it? As long as we're continually moving one step at a time, and then it all depends on whether we think we can or we can't, what our attitude is. As long as we keep moving, it's just see all the words that are all strung together and intertwined when we're having these conversations. And then just last week when I talked about the word grammar and how much the words that we use, what they mean to us and how powerful they are, and talking about, like Bruce Lee says, that words are like spells. They're full of energy like spells. That's why they call it spelling. So the words that we use, and then when we use them in a casual conversation in our grammar, we don't seem to realize how powerful those words are, because those are instructions. Those are seeds that these are buttons that we're pressing, are putting into our mind, instructing our mind to follow through, see it this way, understand it this way, but then again, this value is telling me that I don't agree with that. Why do I have that belief? And once again, we see so much in such a short period of time that we've got to focus on the answer with all these things getting through at us.
Yeah.
You've nailed that beautifully.
And that's just one person's perspective. For another to respond to.
Yeah. And all of these limiting beliefs that you referenced Those are all perspectives, multiple perspectives that we have, only they're holding us back. They are less than opportune perspectives, and we need to look at them. We need to deal with them. But Gerald, you referenced a quote that's just kind of coming together in the back of my head, and I forget who it was. I think it's been attributed to Henry Ford. But you said,
Whether you think you can or whether
if
you
you
think you
think you
can't.
can or you think you can't, you're right.
You're right.
Yeah, yeah, and that's such a powerful, powerful thing if you think about it. Some people say, "Huh? I don't get that." If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Well, I can't be both. No, no, it's not that you're both. It's if or, then you're right, and you limit yourself by your perspective on something. If you think that's right, you'll work it that way. If you think that's
Yeah.
wrong, you'll work it that way. And so we really, really need to look at our perspectives, look at our own point of view before we start, shoving it out there, because we may be surprised. And it's worth taking the time to check, taking the time to think about how you think about things.
Hmm.
It almost sounds counterintuitive, but it's real. It's there, and I think perhaps the better coaches, if you're looking for a coach, I think the better coaches are the ones that are able to stop and look at themselves, and they 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 don't they're not afraid to examine themselves on a regular basis too. When it's not that they're insecure, it's not that they don't believe in what they believe, but they are able to expand and extend what they believe and discard things that they have proven to be incorrect and build stronger as they go forward. And a good coach will teach you that as a client of a coach. A good coach will teach you how to embrace more and embrace different things and examine the things that you're doing. You may be gung ho about a concept, but not have the peripheral things that make it possible. Or
Yeah.
you may be believing strongly in something because of your upbringing or your background or something you heard one time, only to discover that it just isn't viable. It isn't true. And so you want somebody to show you that before it becomes a disaster. You don't want to be. I often say, and Gerald, you quote me on this quite often. I say the time to hire your guide is before you get lost in the woods.
Yeah, I love
And
that quote too. I quote you all the time too.
well, it's but that's so real that if you're out there in the woods, you're building your business. I work with a lot of coaches. I coach coaches. I'm often referred to as the coach's coach. And I coach many people from different walks of life and many different business and professions. But probably half or a little more of my clients are actually coaches. And you might say, well, why would a coach have a coach? Because they're smart, because they know that they can't know everything themselves. They know that they have a perspective, and they want somebody else to look in on them and validate their perspective or show them where they could change it and gain more traction. I
Yeah,
mean,
can I interrupt?
yeah.
I wanted to add something that you said before I forget to mention it. You mentioned, sometimes the coach or whoever you're working with, mentor, guide, they're helping you, recognize things that could be wrong and so on. I guess helping you identify fallacies. But I think it goes beyond that because sometimes it's something that worked for you, but it worked for you then with the person you were back then. And now that you've grown and you've developed, it no longer serves you. So it's not necessarily about it being right or wrong. It's just not useful in
now.
this moment for this task is not useful anymore.
Yeah, that's so important because we often talk about being in the now. You can't do anything, you can't control the future and you can't change the past. Live in the now and understand the now. But what you have to understand about the now is that the now is moving. If you think of time as a linear thing, now is always now, but it isn't yesterday or the day before, and it isn't yet tomorrow or the day after, but it will be. And today will be yesterday and tomorrow will be now. It's hard to get your head around. It's so
Yeah, that's
obvious,
like,
right?
woo!
But it's so important that we understand that, because what works for us now might not work for us now.
I
The
wanted
later
to just
now.
Yeah.
put a couple things that you said together. Gerald talked about the idea of we're always moving, and one of my coaches is a stilt walker, and she talks about how when you're walking with stilts, you have to keep moving all the time, because really you are just falling from one step to the next. You're not actually walking, it's just controlled falling.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that it's okay to make missteps and mistakes and to fail and fall and to do the wrong thing, because you're continually moving. You're moving on to the next thing, and you're learning from what you've done, and you're growing. But it's that constant movement, the way that time is always moving, now is always moving forward. That's something that you get to do too in all your work that you're doing. So your perspective changes because your point of now always changes.
Yeah.
Which
So
is
you're
a point
always
of
looking back and looking forward at different viewpoints from now.
Yeah.
exactly. It's a point of view. It's a perspective, and it
Yeah.
changes in spite of us. And that was the kind of the point I was trying to make there. You did it so eloquently. The
Yeah.
need to make those changes. When I there's so many methodologies. I know when I was at Motorola years ago, they sent me on a course to learn about ways of examining points of view, and of examining concepts and actual methodologies that you could use. And I remember three of them. There were about a dozen, but brainstorming, right? That's we probably all know about brainstorming. Two or three people get together or more, and they throw out ideas and talk about them, and out of that comes something. In some ways, a mastermind is a brainstorming session. Even this session is a bit of a brainstorming session, because we talk about things that key other thoughts, that key other conversation, and it progresses. So that's a very powerful tool. Nominal group process is another one I remember. I loved that one. It was really interesting. It's a very formal process where you break into groups and work on certain aspects and then bring the whole thing back together at the end. It's a group process, and and that's ideal. And trying to think of the other one. List refinement, I think, that's not the exact name for it, but it has to do with refining a list. You work with a list of things and refine it. And I remember those three. That just, that's years and years ago, and I used many of them, more than just those three. Probably used those three the most. But there's so many different actual methodologies that whatever your perspective on something, you can find a formal methodology that you can use that will guide you in your process. And process is everything. We're always moving. Time moves. We often say time moves despite us, but no, we move along with time. We flow in the river of time. But only a dead fish goes with the flow. In order to be able to use time effectively and do the things that we want to do and accomplish things, we need to figure out a process. And if we're going to deliver a service to somebody, we need to figure out a process. If we're going to bake a cake, we need to figure out a process. In many cases, they've already written down the process for us, called a recipe. Well, we need a recipe for success in almost everything we do. And depending on how, in terms of our own ability, how easy it is for us to stay on track. We may be able to work with a very uh, skeletal process that we can fill in the gaps easily. Or if we can't do that, we may need a step-by-step process where each thing that has to happen is there, clearly defined and in the right order. And it's not a failing. It's simply a difference,
Yeah.
creative or not creative, whether you need the holding hand, or whether you can get through a lot of these things on your own. But in both cases, it's good to check. It's
Yeah.
good to look into what it is you're doing and be sure that as a creative, you're not missing a whole step that's going to make your cake, fall every time. What did I do wrong? I
And
every
sometimes it's as complex as the temperature in the environment that you are making this cake, so that if your flour is a certain temperature, the yeast is a certain temperature, and the two don't, mesh, or they're not controlled enough, you're not likely to get the same result each time if you don't have the same process and the same temperature of ingredients
yeah.
each time the same way. So it's so, so fascinating. And you had mentioned this earlier, Steve, about the environment and how the environment has an impact on all of these things. And you mentioned the social environment. There's also the physical environment, which sometimes I think many people that I work with and have conversations with, it's easier for them to recognize the social environment because they understand how people influence them, but they're not as keen or clear on how the physical environment influences them. So they think that, okay, the physical environment is set and they have no control over that when they do have some control over that. And I'll give you an example. Um, I'm working with someone to get them into the habit of riding their exercise bike. And when we had the initial conversation, um, they said they had tried it before, and so they knew how to do it. They had the bike. It was in an okay location and so on, but they never continued. And in the conversation, trying to understand what caused the friction to cause the habit not to be maintained. And of course, the person is just insisting, well, I just need to focus and I just need to prioritize and I just need to set the goal. I found out that the seat on the bike was painful. And so it was one of those, really hard seats. And so the person wanted to ride for half an hour, but it was actually physically painful to sit on the bike to ride for half an hour. And they were totally dismissing how important that one factor
Mhm.
was in deterring them from riding. So right now we're working on getting a more comfortable seat because that is going to encourage the riding for the half an hour. And so sometimes we negate the impact of these what we call little things in our physical environment.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like to call them the forks, right?
Yeah.
The forks that are in us that keep us from whatever it is. And you may not be able to, there may be big forks that are in you that you're not able to deal with and handle right now. Maybe the finances aren't there to get that seat right now, right? So it depends, or there's nothing local that you can just go pick up, and so you might reduce to 15 minutes, maybe 15 minutes twice a day instead of half an hour once a day, that kind of thing. But the other piece around forks is that maybe you can reduce another fork. Like maybe if you go pee, that's gonna like reduce your frustration, and so you're going to be able to handle something else more. So those forks that get stuck in us are all those irritants in our environment.
Yeah, it's we've just scratched the surface of this topic. I can't. We've got to do this again in the future. For a break, something different next week. But um, you'll never know what you're going to see when you join us for the session, because the topics that we have available to discuss. And by the way, if anybody's watching this right now on the live, or later watching it right now on the replay, you can't tell which one is which, can you? So if you have a topic you'd like us to get into, or you have a question, something particular that you could use some help with, feel free to reach out to us. And you if you want to keep it private, you can DM us on Facebook, or message us on LinkedIn, wherever it is that you contact us. And and if you don't want your name used or that sort of thing, we're all fine with that. Just tell us and we won't. And if you want us to paraphrase your question so that it's not obviously your words or something, that's okay too. Or if you want to share it straight up and get a direct answer to you, by all means, share a question or a comment or a thought, or a suggestion for a topic, something that you're interested in and would like to hear more about. I'm amazed, absolutely amazed, at the topics that I keep coming upon each week, almost every day, that I hadn't thought about before, I hadn't focused on before, I hadn't seen from that perspective before. It's been just astonishing, and it just never stops. If you're bored and you're not finding new things to think about and discuss and work with and so on, come and talk to me. I'll help you out. There's no reason to be bored in this world today. I mean,
None
I've been
whatsoever.
around a long, long time, and I find something new, I learn something new every day, multiple times a day. So it's a. Any last words? We're running out of time here now.
I'll just jump in, Steve,
Yeah,
and say,
please.
like what you were just saying there about, like, if you're bored, and something that Cass brought up about continually moving forward, like on the stilt example the girl gave you, or the guy, whoever does that. I recently came across one, and it was Albert Einstein says that life's like a bicycle. In order to keep your balance, you got to keep moving. And that's all we can do,
Yeah.
is just keep moving. Because
Keep
my
moving.
wee example of sitting in the curb with your head down, and just shutting everything off is quitting. It's just giving up,
Yeah.
and then we've all got that choice. We've got a choice, like, not to do anything, or do something, but that's also a choice if we choose not to do anything. So
Hmm.
we've all got our choices, and the words that we talk to ourselves using shape are the script for the life that we live.
Yeah.
So there's always something to be learning, moving forward. And if you don't like the position you're in just now, just keep on moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In the immortal words of Dory from Finding Nemo, just keep swimming.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's such a simple thing, such a basic thing, that we often, ignore it, or don't realize how
We
it
complicate
impacts
it.
us. Yep. We complicate it. Keep it simple. Yep. That's there. Cass, final words?
Yeah, a quote from Sterling K. Brown. Empathy begins with understanding life from another person's perspective. Nobody has an objective experience of reality. It's all through our own individual prisms. And they could have used kaleidoscope right there too, right?
Yeah.
So perspective
Yeah,
is
that's what a
everything.
kaleidoscope is, a series of
Yeah.
prisms. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, folks, you guys, I'm part of a mastermind group that meets on Tuesday nights, and I always go away from there energized. Even when I'm dead tired, it's the end of the day, and it's Mondays are really busy and difficult for me. So by Tuesday, I'm worn out for the week. My week ends on Tuesdays, and I go out of that session energized. But this session, I go out of here every time we do one of these, knowing something I didn't know when I came in. And, I've got a pretty significant body of knowledge, and I've got a lot of perspectives, and I've got a lot of opinions. I'm an opinionated person. And yet, every time I come to this session, I go away with something I didn't know. And many times some things, or at least a different perspective, wrap it up properly, on what I did know already. And guys, you are so great. And anybody who is watching this, I mean, if you're not watching this and I could reach out and tell you to watch it, that would be great. But you got to find it on your own, get there from here. And if you are watching this, keep your mind open, because every time we do a 1 hour session like this, there are hundreds of moments that I get. And I know there's ones that slip by me that I don't, have that eureka moment on them, but I could have. So I've actually gone back and listened to a couple of these. Participating in it is one thing, and I pick up so much. When I go back and listen to it, it's like it's a whole new thing. So I really encourage you. A lot of work is put into these, and I want to thank the people that do the front end and the tail end on it. Get it all massaged and worked out. People that are doing some great stuff here, great artwork and great things. I want to thank you all and participating. The four of us commit to this and share a lot. And we'd love to have people out there that watch it. And if that's all that happens, that's wonderful. But if they would let us know, too, that they're out there. I had 3 different people last week comment on a previous video, not last week's, but a previous video. And it kind of blew me away. It felt so good, the comments that they made. And I couldn't ask for more. I'm not twisting your arm. I'm not, trying to force you to say nice things. Say bad things. If there's something that we're not delivering or we're doing wrong, let us know. We'd love to hear. It's there. So, guys, with that, thank you very much for being here. Go ahead, something, or just saying bye.
I'm going to suggest experimentation from Shelly Ann as our topic for next week.
Got it.
Ooh, yes, please. Love that one.
Yes. Good stuff. Okay, folks, next week is experimentation. See what we do with that. I love it.
And I'll work on my lighting for
yes.
next
I was thinking, the shadow knows.
Yeah.
But most people won't get that reference. But look it up. Google it. Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
take
it away.
Right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.